Hello, I'm Ross Jones. I work in product management looking after high value payments, and I'm joined today by my colleague Barry Trowbridge. We're going to be talking about the impact of ISO 222 and what it is, when migration of this standard's going to take place, and why. We're going to be talking about the key benefits that corporates can expect to receive, and also as well some of the key considerations that they need to take into account over the next few years. So let's dive straight in. So what is ISO 222? It is a payment and cash management messaging standard, which was brought into being back in 2004. Some key market infrastructures, they identified that the current messaging format was a little bit complex and didn't really lend itself very well to the needs of the users, the originators and the beneficiary on the ends of the payment. Now, whilst they implemented this, or they came up with the scheme or the format rather, in 2004, it hasn't really come into global use as yet. A number of new payment schemes have come into being since then. They've adopted this new messaging format as their standard. This includes SEPA and also as well a number of the 54 immediate payment schemes which have come into being in very recent years. It's taken time for this messaging standard to be adopted for payments which are typically of high value and urgent nature, and those which are settled through the real-time gross settlement systems. But the time has come for this change to take place, and it's being led by the key market infrastructures, by SWIFT, and it really is a once-in-a-generation change in the payment industry. We are at the start of a journey. It's going to be, it's going to be a 5-year journey with a significant amount of change, especially in the interbank space. But there will be a number of benefits which will be realized by corporates as a result of this change, and we're excited to talk to you about those today. So why is this migration to a different payment format taking place? Well, ultimately, it's to fulfill clients' demand. The legacy payment formats are restrictive. There are limits in terms of what data can be carried from the sender to receiver. And as a result, then that has an impact in terms of reconciliation and an understanding of what payments represent. Some of these legacy formats are over 25 years old, so they're definitely due a change. The ISO standard is really going to become a global standard. It has a much richer level of data, both on the origination and the beneficiary side, and especially on the payment remittance side, where there's a significant amount of fields and lots of really important information which can be carried forward in the payment, which aids everyone involved in the payment itself. So a result of this is increased automation, interoperability, which is a big thing as well. So, a corporate and an originator should be able to and should expect to be able to make a domestic payment as easy as an international payment and vice versa. This definitely hasn't been the case with a variety of different formats and expectations across the world, but all the banks are coming together to present a much more consistent offering to all users of payments. This migration is taking place over the next 5 years. Barry and I are very involved in this at Barclays, spending a lot of our time discussing this migration and working out how we get it done. It starts off in November 2022 with SWIFT Target 2 in Europe and Euro 1 in Europe migrating to the full rich standard. CHAPS is going to begin its journey with a phase 1 approach in June of 2022, but that really is just a like-for-like change with no extra rich information being carried through the payment. But they themselves will move forward in February 2023, move into the full rich data standard, and they'll be followed very closely by Fed and CHIPS in the US. But there's a number of different RTGS schemes, a number of different settlement schemes, even including BACS and FBS, which are assessing the use of ISO in terms of being able to remit payments domestically and obviously internationally. But the good thing about this is banks have to do it, so it's enforced, and the ultimate result of this is going to be that banks need to change the way that they exchange messages with themselves. There's going to be a much richer level of data, and that's going to drive a significant amount of new benefits, which are going to become available to corporate customers. Next slide, please. So this is when I'm going to bring my colleague Barry in, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion around some of the benefits that that a corporate can expect to receive. So Barry, welcome to the webinar. From your perspective, what do you think is the primary benefit of this migration, which we're going to see over the next few years?
Yeah, good question. So I think when I think about benefits of ISO 222, I really actually want to maybe just start by taking a bit of a step back, because when we think about what ISO 222 is, it's this format which allows lovely, rich, structured data to flow. So really, when we think about the benefits, what we're really thinking about is ISO 222 being an enabler for lots of really, really good opportunities. And if I was to pick out one top level benefit or potential benefit that this can drive towards, I'd probably go with frictionless payments. So when I say frictionless, I don't just mean a payment getting from A to B quickly. That's really important, but it's also what's happening on both sides of that payment chain. So if you're receiving funds, for example, it's your ability to reconcile those funds, at speed, because that will, lead to things like, better cash allocation, better use of working capital. So it's really about, for me, taking out those points of friction, with your payments.
Yeah, I think that's primary. The extra level of information that can be carried forward in the remittance is a big plus. Barry, do you have an example to try and bring this to life for the audience?
Yeah, so let's just pick up on that last one which you touched upon, which is remittance information. So if you take a payment in today's world, when you send a payment, you'll quote a reference for receipt of those funds, the beneficiary. So let's just give an example of paying an invoice. Currently you've got a certain amount of space to work with. I think typically 140 characters. It may vary between payment schemes, but typically, that kind of level of sort of data to play with. That's actually quite restrictive. So if you're looking to send in a payment to pay a set of invoices, for example, you can't do it necessarily that well in today's world. You're quite restricted. The beauty of ISO 222 is you don't really have that kind of length restriction, and it's set up in a way that will allow you to declare what you're actually sending. So the structure of it says, right, I'm paying you for a set of invoices, and these are your invoice references. And the beauty of it is you get it at the other end. You've got all of that information. It's really clear. You can automate all of your systems to reconcile that, at speed, at pace. And maybe if I play it back around the other way, maybe you're paying those invoices and your goods aren't getting released until that payment's been made. So you're relying on both sides of that payment chain potentially. So yeah, that's probably the example I would go with.
Yeah, no, that's a great example around that whole automation. That's critical, and I think, like you say, it could be that a supplier is waiting on a payment in order to release a shipment, and if they're able to reconcile that payment much quicker and say funds in, we're good to go, then it allows the businesses involved to just focus on their core business and not have to worry about investigations and things going wrong with the payment.
Yeah, and there's other things that kind of play off the back of this as well. So another area when we think about, or another potential friction point in today's world, is your ability to identify different parties within a payment. So a lot of people will, for example, be running sort of AML fraud type processes. If you take a payment today, when you send a payment or when you receive a payment, you're basically working off of a sort of block of address text. So it's all quite sort of free format. Whereas if you sort of look at how that can be structured within an ISO 20022 message, there's a really lovely, rich structure you can work with. So you can, for example, separate out things like town and country. So it's very, very clear that when you're receiving the funds, who you're receiving them from, what country you're receiving it from, really critical information. So you can potentially look then to reduce other friction points when it comes to AML and fraud and that type of thing, and also lead to things like operational efficiencies as well. So you can automate more off the back of that, kind of thing.
Yeah, these are really basic concepts, right? And you would think that, what is crazy to think that we're in 2021 and, we're sending information globally in an unstructured way and expecting, reconciliations to be automated, but that's just not the way, is it? So this is a significant step forward. And I think over the next few years, I think everyone's going to get to grips with this extra info and work out ways to just improve their operating model, end to end.
I completely agree, and I think there's some really smart ways that this migration can be leveraged, and I think it's incumbent actually on the community. So the banks, the vendors, the payment system providers, and I guess the corporates themselves in terms of taking that opportunity to leverage all of this. Another example might be, if we're looking at smart use of data, things like analytics, for example. So one of the options you have with ISO 20022 is you can declare the purpose of a payment, and it's very distinct within its own sort of data field. Where that might come into play in terms of sort of smart data, smart analytics, is if, for example, you're running a very large organization, you're made up of multiple subsidiaries, and you have quite a complex structure. You could be making lots of payments for the same purpose to lots of different suppliers. If you can take your data in a way that will allow you to have really smart MI on that stuff, you can look at that and you can say, right, I'm paying all of these suppliers. I think I can reduce down those number of suppliers. I think I can negotiate better payment terms, on behalf of the entire business. So you have some really good opportunities here just through the, use of really smart data.
Yeah, that's a good example of using that data. I think one of the primary benefits that I like about this is it's making it bank agnostic, in the sense that a lot of the listeners to this webinar, they'll be multi-bank. They'll be, especially if they're global, they're going to have banks across the world. And the way that they integrate and send and receive information with those banks is very likely to be different. But with this migration, that is going to shift. It's going to be a consistent way to send and receive information. Not only is that going to make things easier in terms of making payments, but also as well, they can expect to receive the same level of information on a receipt coming in from Brazil compared to India, compared to like the Philippines, for example, which means that it's their operating model should be much more efficient in that way, because they don't need to look for differences and expect differences and deal with different countries and different suppliers in different ways, because they're going to have that same level of consistent info. Also, as well, in terms of this, and you and I have talked about this, Barry, this ISO XML format, it's not new, right? And a lot of the corporates have been using this format for some time, but because the banking infrastructures have not been set up to support it, they might be sending information through to their bank, but because that scheme isn't set up to be able to pass that on, there's truncation issues, there's translation issues. So the corporate isn't able to realize the true benefit of the ISO message. All of this is going to change. So all of a sudden, all of this extra information, or these fields that they've been seeing but not being able to use, they're suddenly going to be able to use. So it's going to be a big shift, and I think it's definitely going to be a very positive one. Something which you touched upon as well was around the fraud piece, right? So we know in banking, right, the cost of compliance and risk management is very high, and it seems to increase year on year, and that's no different for a corporate. with this extra information, I think it's fair to say that it's a way that we've been able to respond in the banking industry to a lot of demands from corporates to be able to pass on and receive this extra level of information related to like debtor and creditor information, for them to be able to scan for the same purposes as we do. So I think there's a big cost benefit. What about the LEI consideration, Barry? Because that's something which has been brought in as well. Given any thought to that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so LEI, legal entity identifier. So that's coming to play with ISO 20022 now as well. So LEIs being, a unique way of identifying organisations, companies, banks, that type of thing. So that can now be sent and passed on, or will be in the future, throughout the payment chain, and that opens up a real sort of additional set of opportunities around sort of fraud, AML, that type of thing. Having confidence in terms of who you're paying. I think there's challenges there and considerations for us as to how we as banks can really drive some advantages from that, and for our clients as well. So for example, looking at your LEIs, looking at who you're paying, do the two things match up? And I think there's some really good opportunities when you combine things like the lovely rich structured data for things like name and address in combinations with things like LEI. I think there's a really good opportunity when it comes to things like fraud, AML, and just having confidence when you send a payment. So just, again, go back to my sort of opening point around reducing or actually doing away with some of those friction points. And I think those kind of things will become very much, the standard going forward. The hygiene factor. You having that level of confidence, throughout a payment chain.
Yeah, that you are making a payment to a legitimate entity and all the information ties up well.
Yeah, exactly that. Just having that complete confidence with your payments and that assurance and that type of thing.
Yeah, on the structured debtor and creditor information, something which we discuss with clients, especially those with sort of more complex treasury structures or sort of payment warehousing, is the concept of payment on behalf of, and being able to use the ultimate debtor and ultimate creditor information. I think that's a very positive step as well, isn't it? In the sense that, that's not information which has been able to be carried forward without the sort of like truncation and translation issues mentioned earlier on. So with this being brought in, and with as part of this ISO XML migration, that's going to allow and support more complex structures for our client base and for other banks' client bases, in being able to make sure that every party that's involved in that payment, the information is carried through. And we keep saying the word structured, right? So we got rich and structured. They're key themes to this, but we can't underestimate the importance of the structured bit, because it's going to be the same for every country and every payment. And it's just going to introduce a level of consistency, so the whole, STP nature of payment is going to improve.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's a really, good example. And it's kind of unfortunate at the moment where you have different payment schemes, different geographies, doing different or having sort of certain demands. And sometimes you've got to almost misuse your existing standards. And I know that's a pain point for clients. If you're sending a payment here, we need you to format your payment in this manner because we need to misuse this payment field. And I think just going back to that ultimate debtor point, and that's another that's another example as well. It's stupid as it sounds, there's not a natural home for that in most payments today. So if you're sending a payment on behalf of an underlying entity, because you're doing corporate on behalf of payments, or maybe you're receiving on behalf of, an ultimate creditor type concept, there's just not natural homes for that. So We've kind of seen a growth of things like virtual account, propositions in the industry. This will really lend itself to that. And when you think about your reconciliation and everything, and being able to allocate cash and everything, it just really lends itself to supporting that and just taking away, those pain points.
Yeah, we're taking what looks on paper to be quite a complex payment message and making it much simpler, much more less complex by introducing a structured nature to be able to read it top to bottom, same format, and we can see exactly who the parties are in the message and what role they're playing. Yeah, it's a very positive step forward.
Yeah, and you almost think for years, kind of 2021, and you kind of think we should, you'd almost expect this to be happening, but actually, it's not quite. It's not. A lot has happened and evolved in terms of the payments landscape over the last few years. I think and hope this ISO migration will hopefully sort of turbocharge it to actually get to where it really needs to get to, where people expect and want it to get to.
Yeah, that's a good term. I like that, turbocharging. It's almost like the high value schemes, the RTGS schemes are playing catch up with a lot of the immediate payment schemes who seem to have moved and built up at a rapid pace in recent years. So it's much needed. I think from a bank perspective as well, with this extra level of data, the likes of you and I, right, we've already started discussing as to some of the ideas and some of the value add propositions which we could bring to customers, because we are going to see more. We're going to have not necessarily this data at the fingertips, because it's always quite difficult to get everything that you need. But I think having greater visibility of the nature of the payment and having all this extra payment remittance information, it's our role, right, to try and present new solutions and new opportunities for our clients to do things better, to improve their operating model. You've got, I think it's 9,000 extra characters of payment remittance information. Now, I think it's fair to say that it's unlikely that many of the listeners here are going to be using all 9,000 characters, but they're definitely going to be using some of the additional fields. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, which fields are the most commonly used, and where can we derive some level of insight to help our customers with their business based on what they're sending to us and what they're receiving as well on the inbound side.
I completely agree, and I think there's opportunities out there because of the way this operates, because the way it's been designed in terms of this lovely rich data set. I think there's opportunities we've not even thought of, but I think it goes around some key themes. Taking away those points of friction, things like improved reconciliation, your cash allocation, better use of working capital. I think there's just so many opportunities out there. I'm interested to see how it starts to play out, and with maybe the opportunities we've not necessarily thought of. I think it's going to be quite an interesting time over the next few years to see how it evolves. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think the more we dig into this, the more we learn. We're seeing new things as we go through our proposition sessions. And I think you summed it up nicely, right? You've got, structured data, richer data, improved reconciliation, better cash management, better cash forecasting, and then you've got some fraud improvements, and then the type of things like the bank insights, which is on us, right, to present to our customers. And I think the end goal of this, right, should absolutely be allowing our corporate customers to be able to focus on their core business, focus on what they do really well, without having to worry about reconciliation and investigating payment and receipt issues. That's the ultimate goal, removing that level of complexity. So no pressure on us then, Barry.
Yeah, no, I think the challenge is there. I think the challenge is actually on us banks, on the payment schemes, actually, and I'd put maybe the challenge out there a little bit in terms of the corporates themselves, in far as thinking how to realise the opportunities. But yeah, the challenge is there,
yep,
for sure.
Good. Right, let's move on to the top four considerations then. And if you could move us on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the top one we've got here is speak with your bankers. So, Barry and I are very much, covering this from almost speaking on behalf of like the industry in terms of looking at what benefits, what corporates can expect from any of their banks. We can't underestimate the importance of speaking to your banks to understand, what they are doing in order being able to support you on your journey on this ISO migration. What can you expect from them? But also as well, one of the key things is it's a prime opportunity for you to speak to your bankers and tell them what you need. What is important to you in terms of data? What would you like to send? What would you like to receive? Because these type of use cases are critical when the likes of Barry and I are working through our product development discussions and working out exactly what we can build to help customers. Because that's what this is about. It's about making sure that the frictionless payments benefit the customers, and we do what we can to realize some of the terms which we've referenced today. In terms of the vendors, Barry, you speak with vendors on a regular basis. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so if you have your likes of your ERP and TMS vendors, and they will be absolutely tuned in terms of what's happening at industry level with this migration to ISO 20022. So I think the key point around here is so speak to your vendors and speak to them early. Speak to them early in terms of finding out what their plans are, how they can support you, and also where they view the opportunities around this as well. So if I link it back to your first point, talk to your banks, challenge your banks in terms of what they're doing and what opportunities and benefits they can help you with. Likewise, do the same with your vendors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all working through this. We've had discussions with vendors, and some of the vendors are as deep in this as we are, because they are fulfilling the needs of their corporate customers, and we're all identifying opportunities and working together to make this a successful change. I think that's the key to this. To make it a benefit, to realize all of these benefits, does need that sort of end-to-end adoption, working with the corporate to the bank, back to the corporate, and just working with with the vendors and the bankers to be aligned. I think is critically important. The third one we've got on here is around building your understanding, and it's attending these type of sessions, which hopefully you found useful today, to continue on the journey of understanding what's coming, and understanding what the benefits are, and working out how to relate the change which is coming to your business model. Where does it benefit you? Where do you see the challenge? What do you need to get ready for? How are you going to be ready for what's coming? I can say that there are going to be new data developments which you will need to provide on certain payments. So these are type of considerations which you'll need to make in terms of how you obtain that information, and then obviously working with your banks in terms of how you send that information on. So there's lots to work through. I would say that on the bank side, we are deep in the weeds in terms of requirements and working through the formalities of what we need to do. And from a corporate perspective, I think you have a little bit more time than us on the banks, but there really is, it's prime time to really dig into this and work out what's needed for your business to make sure that not only you'll be ready on day one, but also as well you can try and reap the benefits as soon as you can to really aid your operating model. And then the fourth one we've got on here is real-time treasury management. So we touched on it at the start. You've got the likes of CHAPS and Fedwire and Target2. These are market infrastructures which have been working on legacy formats for a long time. Not only are they moving to the new format, but they're also upgrading their infrastructures. So they move into new, basically new hardware, new software. They're upgrading everything that they do. So with this, you've got upgraded systems, and they're also expanding the settlement windows. So both of these combined really moves us towards a much more positive shift towards real-time treasury management. We talk a lot about real-time treasury management in terms of APIs and getting information on balances on real time. But I think if we want to move towards real time and 24/7 or even 24/5, we need the market infrastructures to change. And I think this is going to happen with this. I think the two, in many cases, are working hand in hand. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of change there as well. So Barry, I think that brings us almost to a close. I think we've covered quite a lot of content today, and definitely look to raise awareness on some of the key benefits. To everyone who's listened in today, hopefully you found it a very useful session. We've really welcomed the opportunity to talk to you about what is quite an important topic for us and one for the industry. And yeah, just thanks again for listening.